Welcome to the Quantum Connection podcast. My name is Heather Crimson. I am here with my wonderful co-host Vanessa Baldwin, and we have an extraordinary guest today who's here from Europe, and her name is Cathleen Beerkens. She is the author of Your Creator Matrix: how to use optimal wellness and quantum healing to master your story and create your reality, which has won 3 different awards. Cathleen is the founder of a wellness revolution and a pioneer in the space of holistic healing. She teaches students and clients how to work with the new sciences to heal their bodies, expand their consciousness, and create the lives they truly desire. Welcome to the show, Kathleen.
Oh, thank you for having me. I feel very grateful. Thank you so much.
So
Yeah, I'm
welcome.
so excited to have you, Kathleen, and chat with you today. Your book is really, really inspirational. It opens like a whole new world of possibilities for people, as long as they can kind of wrap their brains around all of that, right? So definitely something to get your hands on, and I highly recommend reading and really learn how you can create your own reality, right? You are in control. You are in the driver's seat. That's the whole thing here, right? And of course, I want to know, I mean, I know a little bit from your book, right? But I want the audience and the listeners to know, like, well, how did you get started on this journey, even into holistic health and healing, right? How did that
Um,
even occur?
well, I think like as a child, I was just out of sorts. I felt like disconnected myself. I was the oldest of 6 children and I loved my family and they were amazing. But my mother was a political activist and we were constantly like working with Martin Luther King and Cesar Chavez and it was all to help humanity and everything. But I saw so much pain and suffering and so much. I used to say to my mom, she wanted justice. And I remember thinking, but I don't know if that's the most important thing. As a child, I was sort of thinking to myself, is it really about that? Like that we're going to fight till we get the justice? Because in our DNA, I explained that it is in our DNA, my DNA, to get justice
Yeah.
for women and everything. Because my great grandmother was a suffragette, and I take you on a journey to realize how important your DNA is and what happened before you, because it does affect us. We have never been taught this, but we do carry it on. Behaviors, limitations, everything. So as a child, I would
Can I just pause
just,
you for 1 second? That
yeah,
makes me think of like as a homeopath. It's like we
yeah,
carry those energetic imprints, and
yeah,
whether energetic imprints become triggered or not is really based on like our experiences, right? And then the things that are going on, and then those beliefs get created, and our reality gets created, and then we kind of like. I also think like we allow the same things like coming into the realm over and over and over again until we actually like learn the lesson that we're intended to learn, right? Is that what you mean?
absolutely. I think in the past I just have to say this. So you asked me I'm going to talk about how I got into it in a minute because this is a very important moment. We were in a dark, dark universe. I think we don't realize how dense Earth has been. So if we realize that we're right now in this amazing period of awakening where Earth is actually, and this is scientifically proven by NASA, going into what they call a photon belt, already reaching this photon belt. Like we could feel the influence in the 1960s, and we saw all the changes since the 60s. And I was a 60s child. You could feel the shift, right? It was like a big shift on Earth. And right now we're in this amazing period where in 1920, in 2020, sorry, 2020, we entered this photon belt full force. And that's when COVID hit. And so we are in a shift like no other. So I think it's about realizing that this is not an ordinary period. We are in an extraordinary time. Light is hitting us. So imagine our DNA is shifting, I believe, and it's shifting in its frequency. It's more possibilities are opening up to us. We could say our consciousness is rising rapidly. And so as we're going through this process, and many of us are not even aware of it. We're just kind of going through it and feeling highly uncomfortable because we're feeling things, we're not sleeping, Vanessa and Heather, I don't believe there's ever been a period where we could see the problems from our ancestors like we do now. I think
Mm.
we were in too dark a period. That's my answer.
Mm.
It's now the time. So that's why therapy came and coaching, and it's interesting.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and it's
Oh,
just finding like I'm sorry, Heather. I just want to say one thing. Like, and I wrote this down, like as you're saying, it's interesting that you say that, like the 2020, what happened, it's like that was a huge awakening for most people who or not, and myself included, right? So that was just very eye-opening and interesting, and that has more to do with what's going on energetically within the world, not just, this thing that came around and then people woke up, but it's like this whole quantum like kind of shift is what
Yeah,
I would. Yeah.
yeah, talk about being catapulted into you're either going to embrace, consciousness and, seeing things differently, and also just really taking charge of your own empowerment, self-empowerment, because it's like, if others don't have your best interest in mind health wise and every other way, then you might want to pay attention to, what's going on and how it's internally happening inside of you as a reflection of the outer, right? Because if you don't have that awareness, then you're just basically going to be bombarded with,
exactly.
everything that's
That's
happening outside
it.
of you.
Yeah, that's it, Heather, that our outer reality is just coming from our inner reality. So as the light hit us and our energetic field and our DNA, we started to awaken, which we've been in a process of. And in 2020, it was, well, I have like many people I work with in Holland and they're healers. Well, I believe we're healing facilitators now, but anyway, they told me things like, COVID had a very low frequency and a very dark frequency. And many of us had been living this duality for, I mean, I believe many lives, but I believe that also many genetic, it came through the genes, as I just said. So we were living these storylines constantly. And as we were living them, we were not clearing them. So they were getting a little bit like repetitive. And now we're going to catapult, imagine, to a new way of thinking, a new way of being. And so we had to integrate to our dark side, because in duality we played both the light and the dark, and that's what we call duality. And because COVID had such a dark frequency, it was like coming, like that's why we had to be kind of quiet. We had to go alone and we had to be on our own to go in, like a yin movement, not a
Mm.
yang movement. We had to stop that to have the moment in 2020, 21, 22, it went on, right? The more you resisted the dark, the more you had to have the experience of the COVID. So it's like everything serves us, even a virus. So I think you have to look at, like, we create everything from a higher, you look at a higher level. And so I never look at it. The first thing you have to do is not like judge things, to start looking at, why did we go through this? Why did we went through it. The whole world went through it. It's amazing. Just think of that. That's so incredible. So yeah, I think many are now more integrated and they're more, you would say their frequency is higher after this experience.
Like the world got an upgrade, really, right? And that's the thing, that everything happens for us, not, instead of just like we would think of everything as a negative, right? It's happening for you, though. How can it be happening for humanity? How could it be happening for us, right? So that's beautiful. So I love
So I
you.
know, sorry, Melissa, it parallels to your journey. And I just lived for 29 years in this near the salad bowl of, the world in Salinas. And that reminds me of Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta, which I know your mom worked for,
Yeah.
Cesar Chavez. And like you were sort of steeped in this, protest slash, activist energy, right? Which is just a reaction to the immediate oppression and whatnot. And then you went through the Saginaw riots, which is super intense. You've had a lot of like powerful, intense experiences as a child that molded who you are, right? And led you to this path of consciousness, which I so appreciate. How did you get from like that and then to nursing? I understand that you went into nursing because, right, when you went into the hospital, you had this sort of a like really spiritual
Yeah, it was
experience,
weird.
right? Yeah, and that was really, really touching to read. And now you have your book and now you're training, right, people to bring this medicine to the world. So help us understand like
Yeah,
the
the shift.
between parts. Yeah.
So I think, first of all, nothing is by accident. So I think my mother, she was like very much sensitive in our line there in our genetics, to the slavery idea. The fact that women at the turn of the last century were not free, and that and there was a lot of pain that women endured from losing children, from taking full responsibility, especially in the United States as pioneers crossing the United States. I mean, we just don't really understand the full extent of what that was like, because imagine you're in war, you're in the American Revolution, and then you're going towards the middle of the country and all they had to endure. So that was one line of mine. And the other one on her side was a Jewish line. And my father's line was from later, like at the turn of the last century, Italy and Ireland. So yeah, Americans have to understand that we're coming together and we're like a melting pot of DNA that never happened before on this planet, ever. So that just makes it very vibrant that you put all those, because I live in Europe now, so it's just been now that I see the Dutch more integrated, but when I moved there, it was like all Dutch. That's it, really. And now it's not. There were a lot of Americans there, but not really like I see now, more integrated. It's different now. So we see that Europe's coming along, but they're the old country. Anyway, how did I get into this? I think as a child, I could see things, I could feel things. I had certain abilities, but nobody recognized them. I had ADHD, for sure, whatever that is. I mean, I have my opinion on ADHD. I don't think it's a thing. I think it's a blessing. It's kind of a new way of multidimensionally thinking. So I was thinking like that, and I was not comfortable in the body. I felt like this density was too heavy for me. So I'm not sure. I've been on a lot of quests to understand that. Maybe I was from somewhere else. I don't know. But they call people star seeds. They come in now to help the planet. But I've definitely felt the density and the sadness and I felt everything so intensely. So I was very much thinking mentally already at 16. And I was also very much raised Catholic. So I was always with the children, helping them, like, talk about Jesus, talk about love. I was very into that. Like, I had a friend say one of the funny things, and I didn't remember this at all, that we had gone partying in high school. She said, you were the only one that woke up at Sunday at 6:30 to go to church to teach the children. She couldn't believe it. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe you remember that, Renee. You remember the story about me. But I did. I had this like calling to help others. And I didn't know how to put it. I didn't know how to place it. I also realized that teenager that you had to help yourself. I was in the 70s seeing all the people getting high all the time. What were they doing? They were trying to escape their reality. It was so heavy. So I was quickly like, I remember with pot, I was like, nah. I felt like I felt like it wasn't good for me, for my brain, but I think for others it is good. And I understand that now, like, not to judge. But at the time I was like, I was of course experimenting. I was an adolescent. But what I knew in my heart is that I had to figure out how to make myself well. I was not 100% well here. It was too weird, the heaviness. So I think that was the inspiration. And my mother was not into that. She was only into helping others and only into saving the world. And that was our conversation all the time. And my dad too. My dad was a professor. And I would always have these conversations with them. Well, how can you save the world when you're not, like she was smoking constantly. And I just didn't see her well. I was thinking, oh, Mom, what's going on here? So, but we didn't have the words back then, actually. So I don't know how to explain that, but I wanted to say all these things to her, but it wasn't as open. We didn't have any, we didn't have phones. We didn't have, think about the world then. It was different. And anyway, so I then quickly had that vision of nursing, being in a hospital. I was drawn. I was always very connected to my intuition. Where do I have to go? I'm just able to know that. And I think that's where humanity is going, to follow their knowingness. It's like and that's what I train people in, to how to really know themselves better, to love themselves better, and to realize how amazing they are and that they can do incredible things once they get that story down, and they're not in the distractions all the time. Not enough money, not enough attention, no one sees me, I'm not successful enough. What all the things this world, and you can see it in the young people, bring you to. But I do think that because, you said it, I think, Heather, our outside reality mirrors our inside. Isn't it amazing, the technology? So that shows us how much we're changing. because we've never seen this much technology change ever on Earth, ever. And so this tells me, at least not in our immediate time, maybe there is another time, but not this time. And I think this is showing us that we're going to a very different world.
Mm.
Very
Very
different.
interesting. Yeah. So you got into holistic healing, right? And you started healing yourself. How was that journey? How did you heal yourself? Like,
Well, that's so interesting. So I honestly, I didn't even know I needed to be healed, and that's the whole point. I was a nurse in a hospital taking care of a lot of people. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, like every day, imagine a cancer list like this. And I was a young person. This was not making me happy. I was so sensitive, and they were all suffering. And I was in a head and neck step down unit, and they were all losing their ability to talk, to breathe, to everything. I mean, I've never seen any lose their tongue, lose their nose, it was so dramatic. But I realized there that we weren't our bodies, for sure not. We are not our bodies. That wasn't clearly, they would lose like their entire face. So we had to come up with other ways that their energy would communicate with us. And so I think my psychic abilities started to grow there because, I always knew, like if even later when I worked in labor and delivery at Georgetown, which was a very intense situation because we had like baby, like multiples. Like, remember, that was the age when they were just doing like 6 babies, 8 babies. And Georgetown was in charge of all that, and also the drug babies. So, when you have like 3 women in labor with a lot going on, or 2, you have to use your intuition. You can't always just rely on what you're seeing. You have to feel. And this was a time when I was learning to use those skills. And also at the bedside as a nurse, you can't get away from the pain, literally. You have to learn how to cope with all that. And we didn't have tools. Nobody was helping us deal with all that pain. And I think that's one of the problems, and that's the change that we're learning, that we don't have to have pain in the same way, or we can look at it differently, or healing ourselves is healing our whole being. And that was not happening when I was in the hospital. It was like only looking at the physical. So I was left, and I had a whole family of doctors and everything. So I really thought I was doing the best thing, and I did my best, but I had a complete burnout after 12 years. And I thought, wow, this is not good, that I'm not a good mother now. My child's sick. I've caused my behavior, not listening to my body, and doing all these like 15-hour, 16-hour shifts. And we talk about slavery, right? It's like, what? And I was sitting there with a baby, and then my baby had trouble. So there I had to cope. And that crisis of my son being so sick for the first 2 years of life, trying to figure out what I had done, where was the disconnect, and then I realized that there were a lot of things, many on the physical, but actually, this is so cool, Heather and Vanessa, because you guys are homeopaths. I got the most help with him from a cranial osteopath at the beginning, and then a classical homeopathy doctor. So his life changed. And that made me think, okay, I had done all the Western medicine. I had done everything for him, all of it. It didn't work. 2 years suffering. He had severe asthma and everything. Then I start this little thing. I go to this cranial osteopath. He says to me, your son was born, he knew, by C-section, and I feel it in the head. It's like his head for 2 days was like this. And so then he had to be a C-section. And he said, when babies don't come through the birth canal, they don't get molded, their brain, and they get stuck, their energy. And then that was the first time I thought energy. I never realized that was influencing his health. Then the classical homeopathy doctor said he was getting all like eczema and allergies and everything. And she treated him. And I think one time it all went away. So I had to start thinking, wow, what's happening here? But it was more than that. I moved to Holland in the middle, and the Dutch were very progressive. They're very feminine energy on one level, others not, but on this one level, yes. And I had never been exposed to kinesiology. I had never My mother-in-law had a best friend who was a kinesiologist, an older woman, like really psychic, very special woman. She became like a mother to me there. She's now in the other realms. But she helped me to understand that we can ask the body questions and we can get our own answers. So that was the first idea of self-healing.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, I can self-heal. I can actually, and I didn't trust at the beginning. Now I'm really good at it, but it's like an evolution to trust this energy, right? And so, but you both probably have to trust when you're working with clients, true?
Oh, 1,000,000%. And even on my own healing journey, learning to trust myself because we're so trained. Like I come from a very conventional background. Like we're literally trained to think to go outside of ourselves to heal. We're not trained that we can self-heal. Like we're like you're sick, you need something else. You need to squelch those symptoms. You need to take the antibiotic. You need to take this. Like fear the symptoms. The symptoms are bad. You have to stop them. And we're also not told, we're not told that we're connected. Like we're not even connecting the mental emotional to the physical, let alone that we're connected to everything else in the whole quantum field. That we're not taught that, that's for sure. So that's a whole learning and reconditioning and re-understanding. But it's like we have these physical symptoms. We never are thinking about, well, what is the mental emotional thing or the trauma or the shock or the grief or the suppressed emotions? I love that you brought the suppressed emotions into your book because I think that's a really big cause of disease for sure. And we're not, the body's going to find a way to express, like your son's, asthma, eczema, that's his way of expressing maybe some things that energetically were passed down to him that he's trying to remove. It's the body's way of pushing
Absolutely.
things out. Like, and we just want to stop it all the time because when the body is pushing something out, whether on the physical or the mental, it can be uncomfortable, right? Because when we're having the grief and we're feeling the anger, like we want to squelch it, we want to stop it, we want to stop the itchy bumps, we want to stop all these things, but that the expression is the healing. And I think
Yeah. And so interestingly, it was all levels that helped him. In the end, he was eating a lot of sugar. And
yeah.
I was just not aware, but it was happening to all the kids at that time. And I think it is still happening. So he would go, like, even though I made him a nice lunch, he would change at school to the sugar. And then he would be, yeah, this is true, right, guys?
Like trading
I
up to
have
do this.
3 kids, so don't
I
worry.
mean, we did our best as mothers, but come on. And so I went to a lady who looked, an orthomolecular therapist who looked at what like the vitamins, looking in the body through frequency machine, what is lacking, what is too much. And so we put him on a regime of no sugar for a year with one thing. We said he's allowed sugar on Sundays, so that was okay. And then he had to, yeah. And then, of course, we had the classical homeopathy. We had all the help with the kinesiologist. So we were helping him. But within 1 year, he had no asthma, no eczema. He seemed better. But there was something that came up. And I want to bring this up because when I delivered him, it was traumatic for him.
Yeah.
Because it was 2 days of labor. And I was a labor and delivery nurse getting treated by people that love me. That's never a good idea. So they're all doctors who are my friends, colleagues, and they were like, you'll be fine. You'll deliver that, your mother had 6 kids, but it doesn't always work that way. And they wanted me so badly to deliver vaginally, but it wasn't going to happen. And I ended up with a C-section and he ended up in fetal distress and he ended up with meconium, all the problems you can imagine. And then they took him from me. And the kinesiologist found out that at birth, he had a trauma because he was put in the incubator away from me for more than 24 hours. And that we cannot understand that. But that, like you said, Vanessa, the emotion of being left, that, we had to turn that around with him because if I didn't turn that around, he would be creating his reality from that lack perspective his whole life. So we have these traumas. We don't realize it, that we inherit and we have ourselves. He had that himself. Maybe he also had other things, but we know that. And then when I met the kinesiologist and we really got to that core, we got to this feeling like he was abandoned, and then we could turn that around with kinesiology. It was a life changer. And I did it with all my children and myself. And they all thought I was crazy at the time. They were like, Mommy, why do we have to do that, lady? Or, you know, and all that. But now they look back and they're clearer. As adults, they're more effective. They don't create their reality from lack or fear or. So if you're listening, like I want to speak to your audience, if you're it, I always say this, if you're listening and your reality is not what you want, like things that are showing up in your life they're not what you really want, then you have to do the work to clear the inner work. You have to do the inner work, and you can get help now. There's so many people like Vanessa and Heather, but also I did that work for many years, helping people heal those things. And I teach now my students to help others, because coaching is a wonderful way of helping people reflect and clear those limiting beliefs and fears and things that they don't need. You know, it doesn't always have to be a trauma, right? It can just be these little things that create a big thing.
Yeah, I mean, the energetic pattern is always going to be presenting to us some opportunity, some portal, reflect back to us what needs to be healed. And I look at your experience with your son, kind of a parallel process and in a symbiotic process, Kathleen, in that energetic disconnect that happened at birth, right, was manifesting all along the way and was basically sending you a message that something needed to be healed, and his body was expressing it. And then the invitation was always to you to find a way to be open to that energetic realm of connecting the love that was severed, physically and spiritually between you two at birth. And so that's part of your healing process. So when you talk about being a creator, it's almost like that was you stepping into the portal of, okay, I'm going to walk into this.
Yeah, it was so
Place.
like necessary, because he was not going to get better until I did that work. That was for sure. I mean, he got a little better, of course, on the physical level, but the anxiety was still there.
Yeah. So being a creator, that's what you were embodying more and more in those days, right? So how would you define creator? Because that's right, the creator matrix.
Yeah, so I titled this book Your Creator Matrix, meaning you are not just physical. Like I just want to say I was so frustrated my whole life, like with the medical system, that it was just so oriented physically. And then when it was mental, you had to go to another ward. It was as if we were separate parts, you know? And I never felt that. And so I want everyone to understand that to be whole, like to heal, means that all aspects of you are getting attention, are thriving, not just surviving. So your emotional state is clear. You know how to deal with it. You're emotionally intelligent. And I say it like this. We went through this period where like IQ, like what is intelligence? Intellectual intelligence. And then we said, oh, is that really true? No, it's emotional intelligence. We got emotional intelligence. Now we're getting spiritual intelligence. So actually what we have to understand is that we are all of it. We're not just spiritual either. We are, but when we are in the body, we are spirit in the body. So we have to respect the body. And when I would do all these meditations for years, I was on a big exploration, to go meditate to the 11th or whatever dimension, just to have the experience. But I went to the back of the room and they were all sick. This one with cancer, this one with autoimmune. I thought, okay, this is not how we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be healthy. And healthy is also the body. So you can't deny the body, but you can't just focus on the body and not really get to the base, the core of what's going on with the being. And as you said, Vanessa, the emotional part, but also that spiritual part. Are we connected to our source? Are we connected to, you can call it God, whatever, but the field from which we come? It's easier to connect now, but we have to sometimes remember how to connect, because it requires a lot of, I say it to my students, like it requires a little work right now, because you have to be conscious of it. Like I'm conscious that I'm walking on the earth. I'm feeling the earth. I'm grateful for Mother Earth. I'm conscious that I'm connected to this field. I'm grateful. And that little awareness. And of course, look at all the things that are going on. And we never had so much meditation. We've never had so much yoga. I just think of that. All these tools we're getting to do that. I think it's remarkable, actually.
Yeah. And Heather and I talk a lot about connecting back to nature. And I think that if you connect back to nature, that's going to also help. I found that for sure. Like that was a big part of my healing journey is reconnecting back to nature, like realizing that every day the sun rises every day and it gives me a new opportunity and I can connect to that. And it's always there, right? Like, and I can always go and put my feet on the grass and, just be in nature and like realize that like you are nature, you like are a part of nature. And I feel like that alone, that spiritual connection, that connection to the field alone will then elevate other connections for you. Like, because I think a lot of us are walking around so disconnected because A, we're wearing rubber sole shoes and we're never outside, we're living indoors. Like, so then you just become
Connected to
disconnected.
this.
Right. Yeah, you're not having conversations like with people, in real face to face. Like, I mean, I love that we can connect like this via Zoom, but I'm saying we need those other connections too. Like our society is more disconnected in those ways. And I think that getting back to what's real and real connections will then bring you to a higher level of connection and then a higher level of spirituality and connection to source.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's interesting you guys are talking about, like, it makes me think of The Alchemist, like where are we going? Like people would say, okay, we're doing all this now. What's the end game, right? But it's not really an end game. It's just we are in this evolutionary shift. So then the people will say, well, what does that mean? Like, where are we really going? And so in the book, I go on an exploration of 3 density to 4th density to 5th density. And I find that that exactly what you just said, Vanessa, like, okay, if we're going to really get superpowers, like perhaps that's going to happen. I believe that could happen. Like we have these 5 senses, but we're now developing other senses like clairvoyance, clairaudience, I mean, I could go through them all. I go through them in the book, but as we're going and developing these, I play with this with my students. So I say, all right, I'm going to spray a scent in the field right here. And I want all of you to tell me, any of you, who smells it there? Because we're not in the same room.
No.
And they smell it. They're like, I smell geraniums. So that's clear, that's clear where your heightened sense of smell. Clairalience that is what's said.
Oh, okay.
But there's all kinds of senses that are going to be developing. As we develop, we're going to realize that everything is frequency, as you guys both know. And that as we connect to certain types of things, like materialistic things, and also matter, all of it's divine. All of it's, even if we made it, it's divine, believe me. And as we connect to it, we can become it, that frequency. So yeah, isn't it funny? So when Jesus was saying, I mean, and I just give Jesus because it was an example of, for me as a child, that he could walk on water, he could do all these things. You're like, that's not true. How could he do that? But you could see that in the future, and that's kind of wild to think about, that we could get these abilities because as we think of the water, we become the water, we can be so in tune with those elements, and then we can kind of master them. It's kind of our next project. So, but people will say, oh, that's crazy. That's just magic. That's not true. I can't imagine. But quantum physics is showing us that's true.
When you mentioned plasma in your book, so, we don't think of the plasma ether and how that's the medium in which everything is connected, right? And so our bodies are interfacing with that. And we have to think of ourselves not as just, like you said, Kathleen, in the physical body, but how are all aspects of ourselves as energetic beings interfacing with all that is around us? And we're part of all that. So, and like you said, it's all divine. So there's a lot to digest here. And speaking of digestion, in your book, you mentioned that there's 4 stages of healthy digestion. And I'd like you just to share a little bit about that with our audience.
Yeah, so we are creators. We're co-creating our reality with source, and we're constantly, even if we don't realize it, everything in our life we've sort of allowed. We need the story, let's say. I teach my students this, you need the story. So we have a process called yin and yang in our creative cycles. And we need to do both, but our world is much more about the yang, the outward, and it has been like that. Like honestly, when I was young, I was like, ooh, go in nature. How boring. Like no one was teaching us about that. It was not important. And we didn't know about yin. It was just like some weirdo, like Maharishi talking about this kind of yogi meditation, and everybody put him down and thought he was weird. But in the end, look at what's happening now, right? So the yin and the yang are really powerful. So let's go through it. We want to create something. You want to bring something into your reality. You're like, I want a new job. So you go out in the world, but you first think, is there some thinking? What kind of job? What would I like? What would make me happy? What would I like to pursue? You start to pursue. That is yang. That is going in the world. We are getting that job. You start to do things to bring that into your reality. Then you start to hear, oh, this one wants you, that one doesn't, whatever. You get the job. Okay, manifestation has happened. But what happens is that many people, they never take the time to digest that, to go into the yin, to become it. Like, oh, I just manifested that. And our bodies are designed, our whole digestion is designed so we can digest what we have created. And also on a physical level, on an emotional level, on a spiritual level, on all levels, we need to take the time to digest. So this is one trap, that people don't take the time to quiet down, to go in and digest. And I give an example of in my life when I started taking yoga, and I would do this pose and then I would start crying. I was shocked. Why am I just bending over for and then I cry? Where's this coming from? But see, we're multidimensional. So I didn't take the time to digest that emotion. So it was just hanging out. So I had to let it go. And the yoga allowed me to let it go. But I didn't know about that then. I was just experiencing it to learn it. And I think a lot of us have to, you can hear me today, but you have to kind of go through these things yourself to really become it. So the yin is very important, but we don't do it enough. And so what we do is we keep going into yang. Oh no, the next thing and the next thing. And we start getting huge stomachs because we have not digested the first creations. And maybe they were traumatic. Maybe we had like a trauma, like we went and got a job and we hated the boss and we felt inferior and we had all these limiting beliefs in that job. And to go in and digest would be too much. And we went and saw at that time a psychiatrist, and I'm not putting them down, but at that time on the planet, we were just going back, right? And I always say, it's fine to go back if we come back to the moment now. But if the danger of going back and constantly releasing traumas and just being stuck there is that you relive it and you never get out of the past, because you can't be a creator in the past. It's not possible. And people who keep reliving their past, keep talking about it, keep this person, that person, this thing, they are literally getting depressed. And those that are constantly, they're depressed after a while. If they live in the future, oh, I'm worried. Oh, what if this happens? Oh, no, they're getting anxious. So both are not really effective creatorship. To be an effective creator, you have to be in the now, in the moment now. And you have to be conscious of what you're creating. And you have to also be conscious that you need digestion. And so there are 4 stages of digestion. And it's, I think when you read the book, you'll understand them. But my students find the most powerful one is to say the law of allowing. It's really shocking to believe that if I'm in a story I don't like, that I allowed it. That's really hard for people. They'd rather, a lot of people got used to being a victim, or they're in this mentality. So they don't want to say, oh, I was a part of that creation. You see, that's the first step of being a creator, to observe that you have been a part of it. And that's not easy. That's you have to take responsibility for that. So that's one trap, that you don't do the digestion. And then there's people, they only digest. They don't dare to go back into yang. They've had a trauma. They've had stuff happen. They didn't work out. They're just they want to be safe. They want to just be in this yin, and they're constantly just doing everything to be in yin. They don't dare to do another thing. There are people that are in that for years. I've seen that. I was the other one, but I do have a lot of students and things that They didn't dare to go in yang again because something, maybe it was with a relationship and it didn't work out and they felt like they were with a narcissist and it was horrible. So they don't dare to have another relationship because what if that happens again? I mean, I could give you a lot of scenarios, but so this yin and yang, so we're creating our life on all areas. So our relationships, our food intake, how we, food helps us digest too. That's on the physical level. So if we're eating and we're not conscious about eating and we're not just eating, we're like digesting our life stories, literally. So the food, the emotions, I call the gut the emotional processing center. So if, for instance, you have been, you've had a really dramatic life story and you start eating a lot, it's just to help you go into yin, but you're not aware of it. So you're just eating a lot and then you gain a lot of weight. But when you start to release the emotion of it or the limiting thoughts, then you start losing weight like this. It's crazy. It's actually, but I mean, many ways to Rome, right? There's pharmacy perspective right now. So we have to say, I never judge. If somebody says to me, I have to go on Ozempic, I have to do this. Okay, that's their road. Would I do that? No, because I know we're multidimensional and it's only going to affect, that's treating the symptom on the physical level. But for some people, they need that. But I think there's many ways to do this. And I think you guys understanding what I'm talking about with emotions would agree.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you keep bringing up that we're multi-dimensional. If people don't understand what that means, what do you mean by that? Like, it means that we have to work on all levels. Like, what are the levels that you're talking about?
Okay, so the physical, we don't deny the body. We develop an appreciation for our body, a love for our body. Many people hate the body. They don't trust it. They've been disappointed in it. It depressed them because it developed an illness, which is only imbalance, by the way. So they have to it's very easy to get out of balance here on this planet, believe me. So I always say, pat yourself on the back and love this body because it's doing its best. So the body holds the energetic field, which is we are energy in a body. And when people die, like I was a nurse, so I saw a lot of people die, I would see the energetic field just lift off. It was like a flight. It was so beautiful. It was like, whoa, they were still there. It was just the energy went up. And I could see after they left that the body was just like a physical thing then. It was missing all those dimensions because as the physical takes off, I mean, as the energetic leaves the body, it takes with it the DNA, the field of the DNA, which is a library for everyone. So everybody has their own library, you could say, of wherever they've been, what they've experienced, everything about you. That's why you are so unique. Each of us are so unique because we're all different. And that's one of the mistakes of medicine, thinking that we're all the same. So we're not all the same. So the spiritual field that we are is our essence, our core. And we have a core, we have a soul, that is connected to that field. So we have to understand that. That's who we really are. But we have this emotional field on earth, which helps us navigate our life stories. And why do I say that? Because it helps us to be in touch with the body. So if we didn't have emotions, just pretend we didn't have emotions. We were literally not emotional. We only had thoughts, a body. Whoa, what a difference, right? Would we ever really know how we were affecting people? Would we ever know if we had overdone it in our legs that day, or we might have a little pain, but we wouldn't have the emotion of, oh, I'm so tired of life. I did a little too much, this connection. So our emotions are helping us navigate our life here because it's so tense.
No, I totally agree. The emotions are really the bridge between our physical experience and our spiritual soul experience. And the emotions help us navigate when we're out of alignment with that soul's mission, purpose, right? What we're really called to express here. So emotions, like as a semi-retired psychotherapist of 20 years, like I've witnessed, right, when we when we're disconnected and we don't see the totality of all these dimensions, like you're talking about, Kathleen, like we're going to treat this over here, and then we're going to go over here and treat that. And then sitting with people in the therapy room and seeing how their bodies were holding the emotional experience and how that affected their symptoms in every way. So, and then being limited to like, oh, this is my practice, my scope of practice is really frustrating. Not that I wanted to go be a doctor or anything, but it's like, how can we help people see the totality of their experience and not, take those dimensions and break it down into something like if they're mutually exclusive, because that's just, I think, so hard on us. So I'm just loving how you're making this so user friendly. And how do you like bridge between all of this and then the cellular functioning and some of the ways you speak to in your book that are so fascinating about, right, what nourishes us at the cellular level to enhance the cohesion of our multidimensional experience?
Yeah. So our cells, if our cells are not healthy and they're not vibrating at a high level, we cannot be healthy and well. And it's not just the cells, it's also the biofields. So I take people on a journey to understand that the cells are multidimensional. So they've got a field around them of frequency. And that when they're functioning well and you're healthy, all of your cells are just in a really high frequency. So the first thing, let's go to the emotions. Candace Pert talked about molecules of emotion. We are on a physical level affected by our emotions. We have hormones. They go, the minute you're in a joyful state, there's like a little hormone for joy that goes to all that sends a little message. She's happy today, joy. And it goes to all the cells and brings them up to a joyful feeling. And that's really true. If you're sad, and let's say someone's always sad because they haven't cleared something, so they're feeling sad all the time, then that frequency is on all the cells. Well, what epigenetics is showing us, and that's one of the sciences I talk about, epi means above genetics. So when I was in nursing school and a nurse, they would just talk about genetics. If I went to the doctor and I had a stomach ache, they would say, oh, I'm so sorry. I would say, do I have to eat differently? They would say, no, that's just genetic. It was what they thought. They were trained, but we now know that's not true. Maybe if we changed our diet, it would affect, right? That seems ridiculous now. But at the time, that's what they believed. So
well, they still say that. So, they still do that.
Yeah, they probably still do that. I'm not
Yeah,
gonna.
they still do that. It's so
I
unfortunate.
know, Vanessa. So it's not gonna be
Like,
awful.
like, how do you not know that your diet could actually change your colitis? Like, yeah, it's
Okay. So therefore, it's not, so look at it like this. We have all these things going on at the same time, right? We have the physical, the emotional, the mental, the spiritual. I tell my students, start where you want to start. You cannot connect to all of them all the time. You will learn how to do that. But start, like I see the students, they start with food, and that's good. They love food. So they want to change their diet so that they feel the difference in their whole being. But then they feel it everywhere. So if they go from eating like a diet that doesn't serve them to a diet that serves them, they start to be clearer in the mind, which is the mental. They start to be able to have more space to digest and work on the physical, and the emotional comes up. So it's kind of like once you make one change, you start to go to all of them. And that's what we're seeing. So it doesn't matter what you do. There's no right way, there's no wrong way. You just start where you are, connect to that, and say, how can I connect to myself and become a better version of myself on all levels? Okay, let's look at that. And I think when we judge them and say it has to be this way, whereas we're the same as the medical field.
Yes. You have to go with what resonates with you and your body and your intuition, and like follow those whispers in your intuition and what you think is going to be supportive for you. And I think that's really important for people to tap into that, because you will be led to the right direction, right? And I also think like the little change, right? It's like that quantum effect. It's a ripple effect in the body, right? Like that little change that you make makes a huge impact, right? On the cellular level, right? So it's huge.
So that's the emotion, right? The emotion is that molecules, but the physical is literally we eat, we become. on
Hmm.
the physical level. And what have we allowed ourselves, humanity, to be eating?
Yeah.
It's kind of wild, right? I don't want to get depressed over it, but I want to be real about it. Like, we should probably look at this and we are looking at it. Look at all the documentaries that are looking at it. That's raising our consciousness to say, does it really serve me to eat processed food all day long? Like, is what's happening when I do that? Am I really creating healthy cells? So what I learned from my experience is that we are made, every cell's made of 3 macromolecules, and we need to eat them at this time on the planet. That doesn't mean we're going to need to eat them many years from now, but because there are people who just exist with their breath, right? Breath air.
Yeah.
But right now we need to eat. Most people, their belief system is they need to eat, and we are made of proteins, fats, and what we call glycans. And they're a certain type of sugar, which isn't sweet. And that is the new science that has not been addressed by humanity. And I get crazy about it because it's kind of like the most important science on earth right now. And I was determined to bring the science out because imagine we're online. We're right now online. Imagine I take the ability to be online away. What would happen? We wouldn't have this conversation, right? So what makes our cells online are those glycans. And they are around every cell of your body. They're on the outside of your cell. They're glycoproteins, so it's a sugar and a protein, but the glycans are the antennas, and they're crystalline, and they're talking to the environment. So they're the way that the cell can be connecting to its environment. In other words, how does your cell protect itself? How does your cell know what nutrition is? How does your cell do everything it needs to do every day for you to be healthy? Well, it has those glycans, and they've been stripped from the food. They're just the way we do our food. That the glycans are made in the sun. They're crystals. They're made of sugars. So what do we do with our food? For many years, we ship it long distances, put it in warehouses. It doesn't taste like anything.
Right. So you're saying when we don't eat it like directly right after, like picking it from nature, it's going to have less of that. And so if we're eating shipped foods, if we're not eating local, if we're not eating seasonal, if we're not, you know, honoring the seasons of nature, if you're kind of eating, something that was you lived in New York and you're shipping it from Mexico and you're eating that, that's not going to have the correct information. It's not going to have the correct proteins and things that you need and the information that you need.
Well, the thing is, structures function. It's like building a house. How do I want to build my house? Do I want to build it with a bunch of straw, right? You know the story of the big bad wolf. Or do I want to build it with something more stable? So at this point, we have to decide how we want to build our being. And that how we build it at this moment on the planet is through proteins, good fats, and these sugars. And so we have to figure out how to do that better because we're all lacking at the cell level. And when you lack at the cell level, you don't make the proper function, the proper structure, which isn't the proper function. And then cell communication is not working, and then we're offline. And when our cells are offline, we get cancer and autoimmune because we can't read. Our cells are blind. Our cells don't have the right thing to see. Those sugars are their way of seeing, or their way of hearing, their way of talking to their environment. When they're not there, imagine how important they are. That we can't do.
I want to clarify since we brought it up because I think cellular communication is so important, right? Like our cells need to have that. If we're not our cells aren't communicating, we're that's it, like you said. But I want to just be sure so our audience understands when you say sugars, you're not meaning like what do you mean by that? You're meaning like
I'm going to talk about that. So yeah, we have 200 carbohydrates in nature, and most of our sugar has been processed. And that is not the sugar I'm talking about.
Right.
These glycans are in nature. So they're in broccoli, they're in spinach, they're in nature, and we eat them. But because they're critical, like the body goes, I know you need to be online. You absolutely need to be online or you're going to die. That's signaling, that's life force, that's connecting to that field. without connection, there's no life force, there's no life.
Mhm.
So without these sugars, there's no life. The liver will make them. But let's be real. How clean are our livers right now? How easy is it for our livers to make everything? Are we just giving our liver too much at this time? Like too much responsibility? I say it like this. When I was young, I'm not kidding. We would just get a cold and it would be over in a day. I'm not making this up. I mean, yeah, you did have some things that lasted, but it wasn't like people were with the flu every 2 months. And yes, we are in ascension, so things are changing and there's a lot of influences. But what I notice is the immune systems are really in trouble right now. And that's going back to the cell level and the cell level on all level, also the digestion that we didn't do, all the things we've been talking about today. So it's people always say at the end of my course, like, oh my God, this is so depressing. I say, no, it's not. We have to know what we're dealing with before we can start to make the world a better place. So start somewhere. Just start.
Right. It's empowering. You have the information now, so you can then make the change, be the example, be the leader, show others, right? How to show up, right? And the more you work on your field and yourself, that's going to impact the people that you are connected with quantumly, right? Like either the field and even just more than that throughout the whole universe, right? So as each person works on themselves, it impacts everybody, right?
Absolutely. So we have work to do, but if we realize that we're all connected, right? Quantum physics is saying, like you just said, we're all connected. That's step one, to realize that, how I treat you is how I treat me. And how I love you is how I love me. But I have to love me first. I cannot love you if I don't love me. And what does love mean? Love means like working on like really appreciating yourself for being here on earth. It's not easy. This is like a school where you're challenged every day. So, wow, look at how great I'm doing today. I'm amazing. And that's like love for yourself. But most people, they don't have love for themselves and they try to get the love from something outside themselves. And that's never going to work. It's like an illusion. So, yeah, this is a big thing that I'm ending. I mean, this is like huge, this thing I'm saying now, because you could really write novels and many people are writing books on just how can we love ourselves more and more deeply.
That's part of the mission you're bringing in with your training programs and helping coaches bring this to the world, is realizing that we are love. Like that is what our energy is love. So it's such a beautiful way to end. I know we're coming up on the end of your time and there's so much more we could cover. It's just so rich and robust. And if people want to know more, they can get your book, your Creator Matrix. There's much more that you cover in there, Kathleen. What I'd like you to do is just one parting word, statement of wisdom, and then where can people find you and work with you or get trained by you?
Yeah, so I would encourage everybody to start just observing. Just observe yourself, your thoughts, your emotional state every day, your feelings, your body. Feel your body. What is your body needing right now? Like just start asking and observing yourself. And I think that that's my final words because if we all did that, imagine the world would go into a better state, right? Because we'd be doing the inner work. So if everyone just started to observe, and I think where people can be trained, I offer a course right now I train coaches at a very high level in holistic coaching, health and wellness coaching, and they get trained. And my mission is to help the mainstream medicine. So I believe that we need a lot of holistic coaches to work with people one-on-one to do the healing that we're all going to have to do. And it has to be self-healing in the future. So that doesn't mean we can't have other ways, we can, but ultimately to bring all of our creator matrix together and be totally in harmony, we need to do the work. We can't rely on others to do it for us. And so we need to have this mainstream medicine start to go in that way and get support and love and not criticize them, because they are just a product of all that we have been. But we have to say, okay, so what I did was I have the highest certifications for the National Board of Health and Wellness Coaching, which helps all my students get into the medical field if they want it. They don't have to, they can start their own business, or ICF, which helps businesses also be healthy, because to be honest with you, the business world needs some help too. And I think that, yeah, so a wellness revolution, but I'm going to be offering within a year a course on self-healing. I want to help people all over the world to learn how to master their energy, to learn how to heal and get techniques on a very high level, body, like your creator matrix, it'll be called, and it'll be body, mind, spirit, and even your soul healing. So we will address all of that in that course, but that's more of a healing course. And the coaching course is more people who really are also on a healing journey, but they really are ready for a new career. One time we had 7, can you imagine, 7 PhDs a few cohorts ago who got dismissed from artificial intelligence, their job, because they're scientists, so they weren't needed anymore, or whatever. They had all these reasons, but that was one of the main ones. And or they were fed up and they just weren't happy with their life. They felt like they weren't fulfilled anymore. But they are now, like, I see people come in from lawyers, doctors, nurses, moms, dads come in and they say, I just want to learn these skills. And what they say at the end of the course is that everything's on a much different frequency. Mostly their relationships, they're much better.
Wow.
Love
Yeah,
it.
they know how to speak and listen, because listening, it's not easy.
Yeah, really.
Nope.
Well, healthy relationships are so important, right? That's a good one. Yeah. Well, Kathleen, this has been really amazing. We really enjoyed your conversation with you, and I know our listeners gained a lot of value from this. I hope they pick up your book, and if they're a practitioner or if they just want to learn, they can learn from you. So thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. And yeah, thanks everybody.
Thank you to both of you for your work. I really respect your work. I think you're doing an amazing job, and for having me today. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen.